Benjamin Gunsberg. Benjamin Gunsberg is an assistant professor in the Utah State English Department. He holds a creative writing MFA from the University of Alabama and a PhD in English and Education. His poetry is published in his chapbook, Rhapsodies with Portraits, and in various literary magazines. He has also recently published a book of his poetry. Would you like to talk about that, Ben?
Sure, yeah. The book is called Welcome Dangerous Life. It's a collection of poems. It's published by Turning Point Press, and it just came out last month, September 2018. Mm-hmm. So you can certainly buy copies online through Turning Point's website.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining me for this interview here. So I'm going to jump right into questions here. What inspired you to become a writer and a poet?
I mean, it probably goes back to my childhood. My parents read to me often. I came from a fairly literary family, so a house crowded with books. I grew up spending a lot of time in bookstores with my parents, and reading was just part of our everyday practice. Everybody read, and I learned to love literature from an early age. But probably it wasn't until high school when I really sort of started, paying attention to poetry. It was English teachers. Like my 10th grade English teacher, I remember, assigned a paper on Blake. And I was a decent student, but I didn't find myself really drawn to any particular field or class. But I remember that paper because I stayed up really late working on it, reading the poems, rereading the poems, thinking about what they meant. And so I think that's when I probably first felt the tug of poetry. It wasn't until college and taking literature classes and creative writing classes. I studied abroad in Ireland and took a poetry workshop there with a poet named Rita Ann Higgins. And all those experiences, I think, suggested that it was something that I could do and something that I wanted to do. And even though I didn't necessarily set out to be a poet, I ended up one because it's something that I enjoy doing. And it's like my dad always says, do what you love. So that's what I ended up doing.
So what about your writing process? How did it come about? What's unique about it?
Well, I don't know if it's unique, but in terms of the nuts and bolts of my process, involves writing early in the morning. And that is, I think, by necessity, maybe more than by choice.
Right.
I thought I was a night person when I was, a teenager and in college, and I think that's changed drastically now that, I have kids, and so I'm up early before they are, and I'm working. And I find it, I think I really am a morning person now, and I think that time right when you wake up, when you're still, I think, half in your dream state, I think it's a productive time, or it is for me anyway. So I sit down, I write longhand, I write in notebooks, and I have different notebooks for different drafts, and then eventually that draft when it gets to the computer, that's when I feel like I've sort of gotten far enough along maybe in the notebooks where I feel like, okay, now I can commit this to the screen, and then, the revision process continues until I'm satisfied. So that's how I do it. And it's not that I reserve my writing for the morning. Sometimes the writing goes into the afternoon,
right,
or things come up, and so I can't probably be as consistent as I'd like to be. But, I try to get up every day, even on the weekends, because I like doing it, so it's not a chore.
Right.
There's other things about writing that feels like a chore to me.
Right.
Sending out work can feel like a chore, and kind of keeping track of where you've sent things, and sometimes the point where you're sort of frustrated with something or it isn't going anywhere, you feel like you're spinning your wheels. I don't enjoy that, but usually that's time where something else is coming. Something is germinating, and so you're going to move past it, even if you have to give up the poem entirely. You move on. So, but overall, I enjoy the process, so I don't mind doing it. I don't mind getting up early. I don't mind sitting at the computer, working in my notebooks.
So how do you get past roadblocks in your process?
I just keep writing. I just try to write through it. Sometimes I do silly things that try to push my mind in new directions, where I'll just pull a word from a magazine or from a book and see where that leads me, or a phrase. Take a break, take a walk, play with the dog, pick up my guitar, something that takes my mind away from the poem. I find it's usually at a spot where I sort of exhausted maybe the possibilities for one aspect of the poem, and the poem wants to turn. And I know that the poem wants to turn, I just don't know what that turn is. And so that's sometimes a spot where there can be snags and hesitations. But sometimes a poem can become something totally different than what you first imagined it was, or was becoming when you started, or even when you're a few stanzas in. It transforms before your eyes, and then you have to go back. It's a recursive process, so you have to go back, and now discovering what the poem is, then you have to review the poem and make changes to to nouns and verbs and adjectives that no longer fit with the new dream of the poem. Yeah.
Is there a poem that comes to mind about this process?
Probably every poem in this book, it happened at one point or another. Yeah, I mean, there's a poem called Blackjack Peers Over the Bed that was initially, it was just a fairy tale poem, and it became something politically charged with the shootings of black youth like Trayvon Martin and so forth. And so that was very much on my mind, and I wasn't thinking about it when I started the poem. I was thinking about the idea of writing these poems from the point of view of Jack, from Jack and the Beanstalk, a kind of fairy tale trickster character, a kind of archetype. And I wrote actually a number of these poems, but this was the only one that really has seen the light of day. But it became something very different. And I think, and hopefully that's a good thing. I think it was. And that's one example. There's a poem in here called Incredible Shrinking Man. And, it's about, in a sense, meeting my wife who's dating someone else at the time.
Right.
So I think I was in my mind sort of shrinking that person, wanting him to go away. So sometimes they come out of a kind of personal urgency wish, or so forth. So sometimes the poems carry on with the seed of the original, or they could sort of become the flower of the seed idea, but sometimes they become a totally different flora altogether.
So, what do you wish you knew as a young writer?
I wish I had a better sense of how long it takes to develop as a writer. I mean, there are those wonderkins, those people who just blossom at a very young age, but writers tend to find their stride later in life. And I think when I was in my 20s, when I did my MFA program, I sort of had this dream of sort of hitting it big early and publishing a book and kind of, but after my MFA program, I took some time away from poetry, and I thought that, maybe I was sort of moving away from it entirely, like it was no longer going to be an important part of my life. And by necessity it was, because I was teaching, and then I went to grad school again, we had kids, and so I didn't have as much time to write poems. But then I kept at it, and in a way, moving away from poetry was a test. Is this something that I really want in my life? Is this something that I just was doing because I was in school? And it is. I mean, I think that I continue to do it. I continue to enjoy it. So I just had a different sense of how I thought it happened, such that one goes to grad school, gets the degree, writes a manuscript in grad school for an MFA, and that gets published early, and then you continue to publish books. And that wasn't my experience, and I'm fine with the way that it happened for me. So I think there was a time I was kind of worried that I would, because I didn't do that right away, that I'd somehow missed the boat.
Right.
And so it would be nice to know early on that that's not the case, and that it takes a long time, and that you continue to write, and you will develop, even though it doesn't feel like it all the time, because the poem you wrote on Thursday feels worse than the one you wrote on Monday, it doesn't feel like you're making progress. But looking back, having some perspective, from this perspective, I can see that, yeah, there is progress.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
This was an enlightening conversation.
Oh, good.
Be sure to check out Ben's book. Again, that's Welcome, Dangerous Life, and that's Turning Point Press.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.